Hi and welcome to a brand new Night of the Jumps podcast. I'm your host for this series, Steve Sommerfeld, and we just had one hell of a weekend in Munich, Germany. It was the third round of the Freestyle of Nations for 2023, and it was about to get wild before we even got to the event. The names that were already on the list, including the return of Libor Podmol and Harry Bink coming out of the woodwork for his first ever time at Night of the Jumps. There was definitely an air of, what could possibly go on at this event. We also had a brand new debutant at the competition as well, Abraham Parra, riding for Team Spain. And it was quite interesting to see how would this work with the new kid on the block who has actually picked up second at the Spanish FMX Championships. But we went into the event with a whole lot of nerves, not sure what was going to happen because we had the brand new next-gen ramp. Well, actually, it's not brand new. The ramp is actually a little bit old now, funnily enough. Nobody really uses it that much. But Levi Sherwood built that ramp a long, long time ago. And in 2019, we had a couple of them built at Night of the Jumps, and we used them for the first time at Red Bull Dirt Diggers. But since then, we didn't really have any events to use them at. So this was the first time in an indoor stadium we would see this brand new ramp. But we also had the mountain bikes, BMX, scooters as well throwing down. And we had, actually, I think there was 9 guys. And it was awesome. They put together an awesome show in training. I finally got to watch a tiny bit of it. And definitely got a little bit excited because there was a guy there from the Spanish team, Alejandro Bonifay. He was going for something I don't think had ever been done before. We'll talk about that hopefully a little bit later on. I think that's the right one. So the event, wow, sold out event, over 9,000 people, nearly 10,000. So we could not squeeze any more people inside the Olympia Halle in Munich, Germany for this one-day event. The VIP, the track walk, it was absolutely jam-packed. We could barely move around there. Everybody was getting their autographs before the session even started. So there was a huge, awesome vibe before we got into it. But during training, there was a couple of little problems. I don't know if you've seen any of the video footage at all, but we had Luc Ackermann subluxed his shoulder. I think it was his right shoulder when he hit the front flip ramp for the first time. Thought he felt good, but he was actually just under-rotated a little bit. As his back wheel touched down and the front wheel was still not there, it basically reefed his arms and he just popped his shoulder out and back in very, very quickly. But then that gave him a hell of a lot of pain for the rest of the training session. Abraham Parra, as he was training with Team Spain with Michael Molero and Marc Pinyol, he just went for a tsunami and felt a couple of pops go in his ribs. He pulled off. Our medics gave him the once over and said, no, you're going to have to go to hospital. We need to double check this. He was starting to fill up with a bit of liquid and they thought he might have broken or popped a rib. And it turns out he actually had a crash a week earlier. He thought he was okay from that crash, but doing a tsunami or a ruler, stretching that rib cage out, it just was not the best thing to do, especially when you have to get your body back down and pull against the ruler to finish the extension, get back on the bike. And I guess that's where the pop came into it. So Abraham Parra, he went off to hospital very quickly. They gave him an x-ray and said, nope, you're all clear, you're ready to ride. And he came back. In that timeline, we actually did have a replacement rider, Pepper Aaron, and he was looking good in training. But unfortunately, we didn't need Pepper, which is, it's fortunate and it's unfortunate. It's great that we didn't need him. Abraham Parra was fine, but Pepper did all the work required to be ready if we needed him. So we might see Pepper in the near future riding, maybe for Team Czech Republic, or you just never know what might happen. So it was a huge shout out to him. And actually, Abraham Parra, he drove the bike for Harry Bink to ride on for this weekend, all the way from the bottom of Spain. He drove 2,400 kilometers the day before competition. Well, it took him 2 days to get here, but he arrived a day before the comp. So he was already tired, Poor old Abraham. He popped his ribs, but he was good to go for the competition. Speaking of Harry Bink, though, in training, he started on the 9-meter ramp, and it's something that we've seen with Australians when they come to Night of the Jumps, and American riders, or maybe Kiwis as well, that we're used to bigger ramps, bigger run-ups, and bigger run-outs. Not such a very tight course like what we see in European arenas and European stadiums. So Harry decided to stick with the 9-meter Aussie comp, as we call it, and he got used to that ramp, went, okay, sweet, we'll get this show on the road. He went straight for the next gen ramp. Unbelievable. There's a whole bunch of Euro ramps he could have worked on, could have hit the super kicker, but he went straight for the next gen. And unfortunately, he rolled the berm and probably took a little bit more speed than he normally would when he just takes a standard run up. And he just overshot it by not just a little bit. It was a fair overshoot. He landed deep. And he was just so lucky that he landed onto an airbag landing, or I think it would have been broken legs for sure. Probably wrists as well, because he went to the moon. He thought he was actually going to hit the roof. But he was fine. He hit the landing and kind of that took the impact out of it, the main impact. He then got bounced off and slid towards the wall, and luckily he was off the bike as the bike hit the wall. So he was relatively fine. He had a hell of a, there was a lot of grazing up the inside of his arm, but he was okay. They checked his bike out, Busty out the back, checked it all, and he came back out for the training session. He said he probably wasn't going to hit the next gen for the rest of the day. He's like, nah, I just want to get through plan B, which is jump everything else, and double flipped the super kicker, and then he thought, you know what, I'm going to go test that next gen. And everything was sweet. He just overcooked or overjumped that first one, which is a bit of a confidence killer, but he was looking sweet in the training session. So everything was looking like we could see some big stuff go down. And so training was already crazy. Then we get to the competition. Abraham Parra, he put together a great run as the first rider for Team Spain. Unfortunately, the ribs probably were still hurting him, so we only saw upright tricks and one flip out of him. It wasn't the run he was planning to do, but he still managed to get through a full run, and that's all you can ask of a dude who actually had to go to hospital and get some x-rays done. Brice Izzo was the first rider for the world team, and he was a runner-up, and I couldn't remember the trick that Brice invented, but it was actually the dead body backflip in like 2006, something like that. So the inventor of the dead body flip, the runner-up for the world championship, Brice was back, and he was looking as smooth and stylish as ever. And he put together a good run actually for the world team to get them into a good start. But the first rider coming out for the Czech team was actually Libor Podmol, who was returning from that crash that he had in 2019 where he broke both legs on a vault or a Cali-Roll. I can't remember which body varial it was. Probably a vault. Either way, he'd never grabbed back onto the bars properly, landed feet first, and both legs just exploded. So for him to come out of competition retirement and in the location where he last rode Night of the Jumps was impressive enough. But Libor killed it. He had such a good run. It looked almost the same as what we would have seen 4 years ago. And he still finished it with that huge underflip. Probably one of my favorite tricks from Libor. Take out all of the body varials. Take out everything crazy that ever did. I always thought his underflip was like the signature trick. So then we went into the best whip competition. And this was getting interesting, actually. Pinyol looked quite good for Team Spain. Mate Cezak and Philip Podmol were like battling each other to see which of the Czech riders would go through because they both looked awesome. And Harry Bink said he hadn't even done a whip in a whole long time. And he was throwing down some pretty impressive turndowns. Unfortunately, when it got to the best whip final, it was Pinyol versus Mate Cezak versus Harry Bink. Harry's bike did not want to play the game and didn't want to start. It just kind of bogged a little bit and he went, oh, that's a bit strange. So he decided to just push the bike off. Busty was having a look at it because actually in the next segment, Harry was about to do his freestyle run. So he wanted as much time to check that bike out and make sure it was fine. So Pinyol was riding really good. Unfortunately for him, though, he couldn't beat Mate Chesak. So Mate now has 2 best whip wins for the season. And, of course, when he exploded that KTM 300 in Berlin. This time, he was riding on the KTM 250. He wasn't taking any risks with that 300 kit on top. He didn't want to blow her up. So that was it. Mate took the win. In the next round, however, we saw, it was actually Marc Pinyol. I had to check my notes then, who came out. It was Pinyol, who was just in the best whip comp. He came out to get some redemption from his crash in Berlin, where he went for the California roll. He pulled too hard on the seat. The front of the bike dropped. This time, absolutely perfect. He stopped the Cali-Roll, landed it absolutely as clean as a whistle, and threw in the front flip, which we did not expect to see from him. So obviously that last month of training down there as well at Malero's house worked out quite well. So Pinyol looking good, getting a whole bunch of points for the Spanish team, which is what they needed after coming in third, I think, both nights in Berlin. So Spain was looking for a win here. Mate Chesak already had won the best whip comp. He came out for his freestyle motocross run, looked super clean. Everything was clean. I'd say the only thing that just let him down, it looked like he went for the lazy boy flip. He might have pulled a little bit too hard, which is very easy to do on a lazy flip. You need to actually under-rotate because as you do the lazy, it speeds the rotation up. So he held his hands on the bars and then at the very last second thought, I'm going to throw out a no-hander on the lazy boy flip, try and get it out. It just wasn't the cleanest, but man, for a technical trick, he still did it well. But it was actually for the world team where all the eyes were going to be on Harry Bink to see what the triple backflip Australian legend was going to do. And like I said, he'd been working on that next-gen ramp. There was a big plan going into that one. In training, he only jumped the 8-meter radius, like those Euro ramps, a few times. He did not spend very much time on it. First jump on the Euro ramp, huge heart attack. Really good run throughout the night. He hadn't jumped the next gen. It looked like you could see he was building up to it. And unfortunately, on one of I think it was on his 6th jump, as he came into the ramp, he was going for a one-handed knack flip. And he said he actually doesn't pull very much on it, but just on the ramp, the bike bogged. The worst time ever. So he was already hooked in with his left foot. He was going for a one-handed knack flip. He peeled off the ramp with no power and there was no power and there was no pull. I actually thought he was going to come up completely short and bounce on the front of the landing and back onto the ground, but he just made the safety deck. His foot was hooked in most of the way. He managed to rip his foot out of the foot hook and he tore his Tech 10s. The top of the Tech 10s, even the inner booty, he ripped that to shreds because his foot hook just tore it as he was trying to get out. So I guess all of that work in the gym must have paid off because if I did it, my legs still would have been stuck in there and it would have been a horrible crash. So he managed to just get away from the bike at the last second, bounced about 3 meters high into the air and just managed to miss landing directly on top of the bike. So it was a huge crash. 6th jump in, so the next one would have been the next gen ramp and probably the double up would have been the next gen ramp. So there was potentially history about to be made and unfortunately we didn't see what was going to happen. But Harry got away. That's the main thing. Unfortunately, the bike bogged at the wrong time, but a career, certainly this year, was saved for Harry on that big airbag. That was incredible. As we went into the synchro competition, though, Luc Ackermann came out, so Harry was not going to ride that bike anymore. That was for sure. So Luke was riding with Brice Izzo. They were fairly in time, but their tricks weren't their tricks weren't the biggest choice of tricks, because I guess there's not many similarities between the riding style of Brice and Luc, whereas Pinyol and Michael Malero, they looked fantastic together. The Podmol brothers were riding for Team Czech. I would actually have argued they should have went to the final over the world team. I thought it should have been Team Czech, Team Spain, Podmol brothers versus Pinyol and Malero. Judges disagreed with me on that one. That's how it goes. The judge's decision is final. But Pinyol and Malero killed it. Every trick was on point. Their tricks were big. They were the same. And they even finished it with a front flip and another front flip in a train. And you could actually tell Malero went first and left Pinyol to come second, but he had to hold back, because as you hit the front flip ramp and that kicker bounces forward, it then needs to bounce back, settle, and then the next rider jumped it. I personally don't even think I would do that, because I would want to know that that front flip ramp had settled and it was sitting perfectly. Pinyol, he sent it, and it was awesome. 2 perfect fronties, looked really good. And so they won synchro. That was a no-brainer. Then we got into the final 3 riders for their freestyle runs. Philip Podmol versus Luc Ackermann versus Michael Malero. And Philip came out, stomped an awesome run. It was actually very, very clean. We didn't see the double backflip attempt. I thought maybe we might see that in best trick. But it was a clean run nonetheless, and it was a nice switchblade flip as well from Philip. For Team Spain, Michael Malero was on fire. Everything was perfect. His Cali-Roll always is on point. And he does it that special way that actually Pinyol does it the same now, where they take a side saddle takeoff, holding the grab. So there's actually only 2 points of contact with the left foot and the right hand, and probably third point of contact is your bum on the seat. But there's so many less contact points as you're jumping. Just to go straight into the ramp is almost impossible. But Malero made that look good, and he rolled around, stomped the fronty. Everything else in his run was perfectly squeaky clean, and he got 79 points. And I thought this will be definitely tough for the world team, for Luc Ackermann coming out on home soil for the world team, but as a German in Germany. This was going to be tough because he'd already pulled his right shoulder. He'd already dislocated it fractionally in the morning. He wasn't feeling good at all. And you could tell he wasn't feeling good because there was a no-handed backflip in his run. And I think that was probably the first time I've seen Luc do a no-handed flip in about 7 years. But that wouldn't even be his warm-up jump. He just wouldn't even do it normally. So you could tell he was in pain. But when he threw out the front flip, 360, double backflip, of course, you knew everything was still relatively okay. And Luc managed to just win the night with 1 point over Malero. So Luc still sitting with a perfect 3 wins in the individual riding out of the season so far. 2 nights in Berlin, he won each night. And in Munich, he kept it going. We came into the best trick, actually. Actually, before we get to the best trick, there's actually a mountain bike section in the middle of it. And it's basically they're qualifying to see who goes into best trick. Alejandro Bonifay, straight away he was going to get in. He landed that cash roll to bounce fronty. He was in. Matti Pekarek, the first time we ever saw him on the scooter, he went for I can't even think of the word, where they do the jump, like the scooter just does the front flip as he lets go and it just spins in front of him. He just missed it in the qualies, but the crowd went absolutely ballistic for this kid from the Czech Republic. So he got into the final for the best trick competition. And I think it was Nico Schultz who might have got in. I can't actually remember who went in for the world team. I think it was Nico Schultz. Yes, it was. Ha, there you go. So we got into best trick. Luke, of course, with the double backflip, he won that one with 90 points. Michael Malero, and actually I think the points were gathered together because Michael Malero and Alejandro Bonifay had 82 points, and the world team at this point, they needed to be something like 50 points ahead of everybody. There was no way that was possible unless everybody either didn't start or they all fell off. So for Luke and the world team, it just was not going to happen. They could not get enough points. So Malero, with his front flip, no-hander in the best trick, was more than enough to win. And Philip Podmol and Mate Chesak, they threw down some pretty good tricks, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. Actually, Philip had a heel clicker backflip to Indy to Indy. I don't think I've ever seen that done before, but somebody said maybe it was done once before, but I can't remember who did it. But it was pretty cool to see that combo thrown out with enough time to do the clicker and then come back into an Indy and then another Indy the opposite way was impressive, but it just wasn't enough. So in the end, it was Team Spain with 448 points, 421 for Team Czech, and the world team with all the dramas, 403 points. So after 3 rounds of competition, the World Tour ranking is Luc Ackermann with a perfect 60 points so far. Michael Malero, 50 points. Philip Podmol, 44. David Ronaldo wasn't there. Unfortunately, he was down at a Masters of Dirt show in Innsbruck, which was only about an hour and a half, 2 hours away, but unfortunately, David had committed to do that show. So he's currently sitting in 4th place with 36 points. Mate Chesak in 5th with 30. Then Pinyol on 28. Peter Pilat, 24. Kai Hazer and Danny Torres tied in 8th position overall with 18 points. Brice Izzo, 10. Libor Podmol, 9. And Harry Bink with his crash, unfortunately only taking 8 points for the World Tour ranking. Anything could change. We've got Mannheim coming up on May the 20th. We've also got Zurich on September the 9th. So if you're in Europe at all and you want to come watch these competitions, grab your tickets on nightofthejumps.com for May the 20th. It's only 7 weeks away, and we're about to put the riders list up very soon who will definitely be there, and Zurich will also be there as well. So if you're around Switzerland, grab yourself some tickets. Would love to see you there for that. I hope everybody enjoyed watching the live stream. If you weren't in Munich on the weekend, the live stream went off. The YouTube chat that we put into the live stream, so I'm talking with all of you guys at home, worked absolutely perfectly. We had a whole bunch of pro riders and fans from around the world joining in on that one. And actually it was good because some of you guys had some info that I couldn't think of on the fly. So it is always good to have you in on that one. Make sure to subscribe to YouTube and you'll be able to get notified actually when the next live stream starts on May the 20th. We also had the live stream on Facebook, so check out Night of the Jumps on Facebook if that's how you prefer to watch it. We just don't have the YouTube comments, we don't have comments from Facebook going into the live stream. Check us out on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify now with this podcast, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast. We'll be there as well. And again, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you very, very soon at Night of the Jumps.